A notion about Oregon's schedule that makes the non-conference games just a little bit spicier.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, the number one sports podcast network out there. Thank you all, especially my everydayers, for helping make that the case. High expectations for Oregon's preseason All-Americans are warranted, but which ones matter the most that are not named Dante Moore? Because there are several to choose from there. And some thoughts on Oregon's defensive line, which might be the best in the country. That's all coming up on today's show. But first, a look at the quarterbacks that Oregon is going to face this year. And one of you sent me a take that I will get to in just a moment. But first, broadly speaking, Oregon plays football 8 days from when this show airs. That's a Ron Swanson eggs and bacon fist pump. Just... yes. So much yes. They will not be playing one of the best quarterbacks on their schedule next week, but as this season progresses and as Oregon builds up to some of its biggest games of the year, there's always going to be a game that's going to be a real kind of test case, comparison point, however you want to phrase it, for how we will probably expect that game to go. So the first big game on Oregon's schedule is, of course, USC. And last year, USC came to Autzen. Oregon won 42-27, and the Ducks allowed more passing yards in that game than they had all year. They actually only gave up 215 in the first go-around to Mendoza and the Hoosiers, and then Jaden Maiava and USC put up 27 points and threw the ball all over the field. Oregon, at that point, statistically, had a top 5 pass defense in the country. They got exposed a little bit. They were still really good. There were a couple of games where they were not as good as they needed to be to go win a national championship. And so the first kind of pair of games that I want to link here are Oklahoma State and USC. Because we know that USC, while they placed a greater emphasis on running the ball last year, they are a team that's going to kill you through the air. They want to run the ball. They have a couple of good running backs. Their offensive line is experienced. But the scariest part about USC, at least based on last year, is their quarterback, Jaden Maiava, who I think is one of the 10 best probably in all of college football. Now, they lost 2 great receivers, but they also brought one in from NC State who's really good. And then, we saw Taj Washington, I think was the guy's name, that had a really good name. No. Wrong. Tanook Hines. Tanook Hines is the guy that actually had a big game. He and Jacoby Lane were the guys more than Lane and Lemon were, Mekhi Lemon, that is, last year against the Ducks. But going into that game, the Oklahoma State game is going to be a good kind of marker or test point for that. Because Oklahoma State has a legit quarterback and has one really good wide receiver. At least he was really good at North Texas last year, and they were a top 25 caliber Group of 6 team. They were on the cusp of the playoff. There was a scenario where Oregon played North Texas in the playoff last year. Probably not, but anyway. How Oregon performs in that particular game, I think, will give us a pretty good indication of, hey, how ready is this team in 2 weeks to play USC? Because the game that is sandwiched in between is Portland State. And you're not going to learn hardly anything except about the young guys that will get a chance to play because Oregon will win the game, or at least they should, by so many points. So that's the first one. The second one is Ohio State. And I think you could look at a couple games, but really the one that I was just talking about, USC, is going to tell us what to expect for Ohio State. Jaden Maiava and the combination of Tanook Hines and I think Terrell Anderson is the other guy they brought in from NC State. It's a good combo. Lincoln Riley's a good offensive play caller. It is not as intimidating as Julian Sayin with Jeremiah Smith, Chris Henry Jr., and I think Brandon Innes is still there. And they have another guy in the fold who I'm sure was a former 4 or 5-star recruit because that's just the way that Ohio State rolls. So those games, I think, are going to be among the biggest tests for Oregon's secondary this year. Washington and Damon Williams, they should be better than last year. We'll see how Damon performs against elite defenses. Oregon, kept him in check really, really well last year. He had a 50% completion rate and 2 picks up in Seattle. That was certainly one of their better games, but those are the matchups from a quarterback standpoint that I think are going to challenge this defense the most, and I have pretty high expectations for this group. I like the talent in the room. There's a lot of experience. There should be plenty of depth. I really like them. So one of you sent me this SSA. That is Spencer's Scale of Agreement. That got me thinking about this particular topic. And it says SSA, Oregon's opposing quarterbacks ranked 12-1, meaning worst one first and number 1 at the bottom. Number 12, Portland State. And in parentheses, it says sorry. That's good. That's good. It's also probably true. Number 11, Alessio at Michigan State. Probably. Yeah, probably. Number 10, Maddox Madsen, who Oregon will play next week. He's Boise State's quarterback. Same quarterback that came to Autzen a couple of years ago. We know he's going to be able to handle the environment. He did that day. The question will be whether Oregon can contain the rushing attack of the Broncos there. So Maddox Madsen at 10. Caden Hauser, that is Illinois' quarterback, veteran journeyman at number 9. Aiden Childs, Oregon State legend, now at Northwestern with Chip Kelly at 8. Anthony Calandria, Northwestern at 7. Bryce Underwood, Michigan at 6. Nico Iamaleava, UCLA at 5. Damon Williams, Washington at 4. That's an interesting one. Jaden Maiava, USC 3. Drew Mestemaker, Oklahoma State 2. And Julian Sain, Ohio State 1. Okay, I fully agree that Julian Sain is number 1. Would I take Drew Mestemaker if I were building a college football team over all of Jaden Maiava, Damon Williams, Nico Iamaleava, and Bryce Underwood? Definitely Bryce Underwood. Probably Nico. Here's the thing, man. When Nico got Jerry Neuheisel as his play caller last year, who is now Chip Kelly's quarterback coach, and he looked like the 5-star he was coming out of high school, a guy that Oregon recruited, by the way. Boy, he looked good. I think his ceiling is higher than Damon Williams, so I would flip those two. Now, let's not forget, Nico led the Tennessee Vols to the playoff. He was certainly imperfect, but, he led them there. So I've seen him play. Like, he and Damon have the same question. How do they perform in big games against the best teams? But I'm with you on the top 3. Question is, would I take Jaden Maiava over? This is that I'm, not that definitive, and I agree with your number 1. This is a 5, at least. A coin flip, maybe a little bit higher. This is a pretty good list. Would I take Maiava or Mestemaker? Man, I haven't seen Mestemaker play a full season of high-level college football yet, but what he did last year at North Texas, he was the nation's leading passer. Dude can spin it, but he hasn't been playing quarterback for that long of a time. So I'd need to see him go against higher-level defenses. Like right now, I'll take Jaden Maiava over Drew Mestemaker. So I would flip those two. I might flip Nico and Damond. I would have both of them above Bryce Underwood, who's still really raw. Calandria was great in the Mountain West, but just okay at Virginia. Childs is less proven than that. Yeah, okay. I gotta bump this up. This is not a 5 on Spencer's Scale of Agreement. This is a 7.5. 7.5, because I'd make 2 distinct changes and iffy on another one. But yeah, that's a pretty darn good list. And I just had the thought as I'm recording right now, I should do a side-by-side comparison of the quarterbacks that Oregon faced last year and see if I feel like they're facing a stronger lineup of quarterbacks this year. It's called thinking of things in real time. So leave your thoughts in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter at LockedOnDucks or however you want to get in touch. Lots of ways to send mailbag questions in or just share thoughts about the show. So I have really, really high expectations for a few guys. Yeah, obviously Dante Moore is on the list, but it's the other guys that also have to have great seasons. First, this episode brought to you by our friends at Lorene Co. So, Lorenco is known for its enamel supporting gum, but now they are launching a nicotine-free pouch. Lorenco pouches are designed to provide clean focus while supporting enamel at the same time. Each pouch contains 50 milligrams of caffeine, plus L-theanine and alpha-GPC for smooth, steady focus without an energy crash. And because it's a Lorene product, every pouch also contains nanohydroxyapatite. I worked on it and I got it right, just like that. The mineral that teeth are made of to provide daily enamel support between brushings. That's nanohydroxyapatite. Lorenco pouches are pouches that swap out the nicotine and give you the clean focus and support your enamel the whole time that they're in. They come in mint, cinnamon, oh yeah, mango, nice, making it easy to find a flavor that fits into any daily routine. So if you want a little extra boost during the day for anything they might need to do, give Lorenco a try. Give Lorene a try right now. Lorenco is offering our listeners up to 50% off at buylorene.com/lockedoncollege. That's BUYLARINE.com/lockedoncollege. Buylorene.com/lockedoncollege for up to 50% off. This episode also brought to you by our friends over at Wayfair. So whether you're refreshing one room, getting ready for a new season, or finally replacing that piece of furniture that you've been putting off, Wayfair makes it easy to find something that fits your home, your style, and your budget. You can shop furniture and decor across a wide range of price points with quality materials and pieces designed to stand up to real life. And with Wayfair verified product specialists, hand vet select products through a 10-point quality inspection, looking at things like materials, functionality, features, and even how long they take to build. And if you're still trying to narrow down what to buy, Wayfair gives you plenty of real shopper feedback to work with. You can browse more than 20 million verified 5-star reviews along with its real customer photos and feedback to help you shop with more confidence. So whether you're trying to refresh a space, a room, an entire place, Wayfair's got you covered. Join Wayfair Rewards today to get 5% back on every purchase and start saving on your next home upgrade. Head to wayfair.com to shop all things home. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Lemonade's the best. Yeah, just in general. So Oregon has 4 preseason AP All-Americans going into this year. Dante Moore, no surprise. Amari Washington, Coy Parrish, Brandon Finney. We love list season here on the show. Now, I talked about Mateo Uiagalelei yesterday on the show and his importance. But for these guys that have gained national prominence to the point where they're on a list like that, not an easy list to crack. Just because you're talented, all-conference capable, doesn't mean you're going to make an All-American list. But those guys being on there, very understandable. I'm posing this question to all of you, and leave your comments below. Shoot me a message, however you want to send your feedback here on the show. Between Amari Washington at defensive tackle, Coy Parrish at safety, or Brandon Finney at corner, which of those 3 do you think has to have the best season for Oregon's defense and therefore team as a whole to accomplish its goals this year, most notably the principal goal? It's a tough pick. It is no doubt a tough pick. I am going with Coy Parrish. And the reason that I'm taking the Minnesota transfer here is because of what I feel the option. Now, by the way, Poncho should be a preseason AP All-American. Don't know why he's not, unless I missed that, but I'm pretty sure it's those 4 guys. Poncho is, however, in our Locked On Top 100 players, which I'm going to talk about in just a moment here. But the reason I take Coy Parrish is if Brandon Finney goes down with an injury and your outside corners are now Naeem Offord in his second season and Ifeoma Badegwu, neither one of those guys is as good as Brandon Finney, obviously. But do I think that drop-off is as severe as what you would have going from Coy Parrish to a guy like Jet Washington, potentially, or a Peyton Woodyard? Now, Woodyard's got a lot more experience, and he's a good athlete. I don't think he's quite as talented. At least he hasn't shown that he's got the upward potential of some of these other guys. Jet Washington's an exciting player, 5-star true freshman. He's played exactly 0 college football snaps. Coy Parrish has played a lot more than that. I think between Parrish and Poncho, and it's just a coincidence, they both have a name or nickname that starts with P and has a CH in it. Those are among the two most irreplaceable players on Oregon's roster. Any injury is going to cause a drop-off or a question or need someone to really step up. Doesn't matter what position that would be. But I am including quarterback when I say center is the one where Oregon can least afford an injury, and the next one might be free safety just because Parrish is capable of playing at an All-American early round draft pick sort of level, and Jet Washington could do that one day. I don't know if Jet Washington is ready to do that right now. That's asking a lot to step in and play safety. It's one thing to be Brandon Finney and play corner, where you had a guy like Dylan Thieneman roaming behind you or Aaron Flowers helping over the top. But when you're the guy that has to see the field incredibly well, read defenses, get your defensive line, read offensive keys, identify plays and all. A lot of that comes with experience. That's a lot different than just going man-to-man like corners are going to do. Obviously not in every single coverage, but far more often. So, yeah, I have high expectations for all of those guys going into this season for sure. And look, Finney has got to be better in the biggest games, and that's, a theme for this Oregon team is, hey, you're better than most of college football. Can you level up and be better than all of college football? And when he goes one-on-one with Jeremiah Smith, we know what to expect there. You better be prepared for the push-off and know how you're going to handle it, because he is going to push the limit of what an official will let him get away with. And look, I have been on the lack of OPI calls in college football and football writ large for years. It really, really bugs me. It's hard to play defense. The targeting rule, it's hard to hit guys. You can get called, I think, far more easily for illegal contact or defensive pass interference than you can get called for offensive pass interference. And I've always been a guy that really likes watching offensive football, but man, it definitely bugs me. But of course, there was that infamous call correctly made by the Big Ten official that backed Ohio State up, moved them out of field goal range. They didn't get back into it. Will Howard slid down. Yeah, that was all good and fine. You know what else happened in that game? Jeremiah Smith caught a touchdown, and at the start of the route, right at the top, because he came from the other side of the field, he straight up pushed off of Nico Reed, and they did not call it. So Brandon Finney has got to be ready for that. Every Oregon corner does. Anyone that goes up against Jeremiah Smith, you got to be ready for the physicality. He's going to test the limit and get an understanding of what the official will and will not call. So I mentioned the Locked On Top 100. Jeremiah Smith came in at number 1, by the way. And that's no surprise. This is voted on, presented by FanDuel, by all the hosts here at the Locked On Network, myself included. And I had a lot of these guys in the top 10 for those watching on YouTube. Dante Moore coming in at number 4. ESPN had him number 11 on their list. It's hard to get a consensus on these sorts of things or have a consistent philosophy that you're going to apply. But the biggest gap between Locked On hosts and ESPN is where they put Mateo Uiagalelei. Brandon Finney on there at number 36. Good to see him getting respect by our ball knowledge hosts here at the network. But Uiagalelei didn't crack the top 100, and Locked On hosts have him there at number 40. Now, maybe that's name bias, but as I talked about yesterday on the show when discussing him not being in the top 100, I want a chip on his shoulder. I want him playing a little ticked off. I want him playing with something to prove. I want contract year Mateo. I need to come up with a term for what it is when a college player is back to, obviously help his team win a national championship, but also to increase his draft stock. Because just saying, draft stock year, stock year, ooh, that might be something. There could be something there. Sorry, wrong graphic there. But Tatum Tuioti came in at number 61. Jamari Johnson at number 62. And if you just went off of last year, you'd say that Tatum Tuioti is a better football player. If you went off their entire careers, Mateo has technically been more productive than Tatum at this point in time. But I think the great thing for Oregon about having both of these guys is that They're experienced, they're talented, and they can still improve. And that's what I'm talking about to wrap today's show. First, this episode brought to you by our friends over at 5 Hour Energy. If you've got a sweet tooth, and I know many of you do, you know how tough it is to find that perfect treat without all the sugar. That's why Cotton Candy 5 Hour Energy Shot brings that nostalgic flavor back in a whole new way. This is that classic cotton candy taste that you remember, but with a tasty caffeine boost and zero sugar. It's a quick, easy way to satisfy that sweet craving while keeping things simple and on the go. I mean, it fits in your hand, it fits in your pocket. You can fit it in between two fingers if you would like. You can have it in your golf bag. You can have it in your office. You could have it as you go out for a walk, for a workout, whatever you're looking for, they've got you covered. And the flavor selection, ooh, man, they go all over the place because they've got the sweet options like cotton candy, but they've also got berry flavors as well. And I am a sucker for fruit-flavored things. Hence the lemonade. That's just what I'm about. And whatever you're about, flavor-wise, 5 Hour Energy has you covered. Bring on the sweetness and more with Cotton Candy 5 Hour Energy Shots. Available online now at 5hourenergy.com or on Amazon. Check them out at 5hourenergy.com. What a coincidence that I was talking about the defensive line. Look, a mailbag question about the defensive line. Wow, that's crazy how things work out. Almost like I planned it that way. Haha. Okay. I can't believe you guys put up with me. If you haven't tuned in a while, welcome back. This is how we're rolling here at Locked On Ducks. Okay. Question for the mailbag. Thoughts for the show. I am a believer in our defensive line, and I know the guys are studs. Just to play devil's advocate, when everyone is saying this is the best D-line in the country, it's the same guys who we had last year. Did their talent change? I know they are another year more experienced, but they weren't the best defensive line last year. But the same group of guys are now. Curious on your thoughts here, and go Ducks. It's a good question. It's a really good question. The presumption about Oregon having the best D-line in the country, which a lot of folks have said this offseason, not everybody. I'm sure some might look at a Texas, a Notre Dame, an Ohio State. Miami's will be good. Texas Tech's will be good. They won't be as good as Oregon's. Why? Because proven production in today's college football world is hard to come by. And there are two sides to that. It can be easier on the one hand, like what Oregon has done to bring guys back and keep them away from the NFL. But it can be harder to keep guys out of the portal for certain programs. Now, when you're talking about being the best in the country, yeah, the Oregons, Miamis, Ohio States, Texas, whoever, else you want to put in that discussion, Georgia, they're going to have a lot of money to keep guys around. They can still lose players. And so for Oregon to clearly have put NIL dollars into retaining these guys, I think is an absolutely wise move on the part of Dan Lanning and GM Marshall Malkow. So the reason that folks are going to look at that and say, well, they should be really, really good this year, let's not get it twisted. They were really good last year. You cannot have a great defense. I know the defense had a bad day against Indiana. They also pitched a shutout against Texas Tech. I don't care which Power 4 conference champion you were playing. A shutout in a playoff game is crazy good work. So when you have a defensive line, and remember, when Oregon won that game at Penn State, I had a number of takeaways from that matchup, but one of the biggest ones was, hey, this defensive line went out and won the game. They disrupted Drew Aller. They took away open receivers that had beat the coverage or individual members of the secondary because Drew Aller wasn't able to sit there and make the throws. So they were really good last year. They just weren't quite as good as they needed to be or as they can be. Because as I've talked about a lot, and is a growing theme of importance in my head with this team, their sack numbers have to improve. They cannot be, inconsistently getting to the quarterback. That's not a recipe for success if you come across a quarterback like Mendoza, which you can, or a Julian Sain at Ohio State. You know when Julian Sain struggled the most last year? When most guys struggle. When he was under pressure. You know when Dante Moore struggled? When he was under pressure. You either have to scheme that up, like Indiana did, or you've got to dominate up front like Miami and Texas Tech did. So Oregon should have the ability to do both. But fundamentally, yeah, you'd like to be able to just get home with your 4 defensive linemen. Really, Oregon's got 5. So the predicate for the presumption of, that was an interesting alliteration that I didn't mean to make, that Oregon will have the best defensive line this year is you're starting with a really high floor. These guys are all really experienced, and they're getting another offseason to improve the things that they are still kind of lacking or still trying to refine with their games. For Mari Washington, I think that's being better absorbing double teams. For Mateo Uiagalelei, it's finishing at the quarterback. Tatum Tuioti could work on his dip and bend around the edge. He's more of a bull rusher and a guy that's really good with his hands getting to the quarterback, but he's not as good being a tackle to the outside and getting home, I think, as Mateo is. But he's a better finisher. He's a better tackler in space. For Bear Alexander, can you become a better pass rusher? These are all, picky and choosy critiques in a way, or it's going through it with a fine-tooth comb. Because these guys are among the best at their position. They show up in all these sorts of lists, like I've talked about this week on the show, for a reason, because they're really good. But when you have the experience, and that raises your floor, and then you say, wait, their ceiling hasn't been reached? It hasn't. It most certainly has not. And so when you have an entire offseason with a great coaching staff like what Oregon has, that's where I think a lot of folks' confidence in Oregon's defensive line comes from. Like I understand the devil's advocate point that you're bringing here. It's a really good question to bring up. But when you factor in that those guys will be back, they know how to play together, they know how they're going to improve, and then you had a guy like Nasir Wyatt work his way into the fold kind of later in the season last year, and he might have the biggest percentage growth of any of these guys. Let's say last year, every single guy on Oregon's defensive line, Amari, Bear, Tatum, and Mateo, were at 90% of their ceiling. Well, how can they find that next 10%? And if you go up another 10%, and 10% of 90, I'm not going to make you guys do math or myself in real time. But Nasir Wyatt last year, where was he relative to his ceiling? He might have been 10% of the way. 20, maybe 20. And so if he's trying to get to that 100% clip, on a percentage increase, he might get more better, if that makes sense, than the other guys in this group. So, yeah, I'm really high on them. I think they're really good. I think Nasir Wyatt should have a good year. The packages they can roll out would be really fun. I think Oregon's best pass rushing group is the starting 4, but take off Bear Alexander, put in Nasir Wyatt. Like if I were Chris Hampton, take my level of ball knowledge as you would like. But if I were Chris Hampton and it's 3rd down and 8 against Boise State, and you want to play just straight up 4-man rush, cover 1 robber, I'm taking off Bear Alexander. I'm sliding Mateo or Tatum inside, either one, and I'm putting Nasir Wyatt out there. And I'm saying, go block those guys. Good luck. Good luck. You got enough power in that group. Boy, you got a lot of speed. A lot of speed. So I'm excited to see what Dan Lanning, Chris Hampton, Tony Tuioti do with that group. So that's where we will cap it for today. Thankfully, the power in my apartment came back on, because there was a world where you were going to have to wait to get this show until like Sunday, and well, nobody wanted that. I appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time when it's game week. And until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.